Hello, how are you all doing today? This is Arun Raj. In today's class, we are going to learn about the topic ecosystem. Ecosystem is the functional unit of nature in which all living organisms interact with each other as well as to their surrounding physical environment. Our Earth is an example for biosphere. Biosphere is a global ecosystem consisting of all ecosystems on Earth. Then the types of ecosystem. Majorly, the ecosystems are classified into two types. One is aquatic ecosystem, for example, pond, lake, wetland, river, etc. And terrestrial ecosystem, for example, forest, grassland, desert, etc. These are the natural ecosystems. An ecosystem can be artificial or man-made, like a cropland, aquarium, gardens, etc. The structure of ecosystem consists of biotic and abiotic factors. All the living organisms in an ecosystem are called biotic factors, and all the non-living factors in an ecosystem like sunlight, humidity, water, etc. are considered as abiotic factors. The characteristic physical structure of an ecosystem depends on the interaction of biotic and abiotic factors only. Four factors are important for an ecosystem to function as a unit. First one is productivity, second one decomposition, third one energy flow, fourth one nutrient cycling. And the function of an ecosystem is the conversion of inorganic into organic substances by following the three steps. The first step is use of radiant energy of the sun by the autotrophs, and the second step, consumption of the autotrophs by various heterotrophs. Then the third step, decomposition and mineralization of all the dead organic matter to release the nutrients back into the soil for reuse by the autotrophs. These events are repeated again and again. If we are taking pond ecosystem as an example, the structure consists of biotic factors and abiotic factors. Let us see what are the components present in the abiotic factors. First one, water with all dissolved inorganic and organic nutrients. Then soil rich in nutrients at the bottom of the pond. Then solar input, temperature, and other climatic factors are present as abiotic factors. Biotic factors can be classified into three categories. First one is producer or autotrophs. For example, algae, then phytoplanktons can be considered as an example for autotrophs. And the second one is consumers, are also called heterotrophs. For example, zooplankton, free living, and bottom dwelling forms. Then third category is decomposers. For example, fungi, bacteria, and flagellates abundant in the bottom of the pond are considered as decomposers. And the last topic of today's class is stratification. Stratification is the vertical distribution of different species that occupies different levels is called stratification. For example, in this image you can see the trees occupy top vertical strata, and the shrubs occupy the second layer, and the herbs occupy the third layer, and the grasses occupy the bottom layers. And it is expressed in terms of weight or energy. Two more definitions are also in productivity. One is gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during the process of photosynthesis. The net primary productivity is explained as GPP minus R, that is equal to NPP. That is, gross primary productivity minus respiration losses is the net primary productivity. This NPP is the available biomass for the consumption of heterotrophs like herbivores and decomposers. Next one is secondary productivity. It is defined as the rate of formation of new organic matter by consumers. The primary production of an ecosystem usually depends on the plant species and various environmental factors, and therefore it varies from place to place. And the second topic is decomposition. Decomposition is the breakdown of complex organic matter into simple inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water, and nutrients by the action of decomposers. Dead remains of plants and animals such as leaves, flowers, fecal matter of animals, collectively called detritus. Organisms that feed on detritus are called detrivores. For example, earthworm, fungi are examples of detrivores. The process of decomposition takes place in 5 steps. Step 1 fragmentation, step 2 leaching, step 3 catabolism, 4 humification, 5 mineralization. Fragmentation is the breakdown of detritus into smaller particles by the action of detrivores. Step 2 leaching is the process by which water soluble nutrients move downwards to the soil horizon and are precipitated as unavailable salts. Step 3 catabolism. It is the breakdown of detritus into simple inorganic nutrients by the action of bacterial and fungal enzymes. And the step 3 humification. It is the formation and continuous deposition of a dark colored organic amorphous substance called humus. Humus undergoes very slow decomposition and is highly resistant to microbial action, and it serves as reservoir of nutrients. And step 5 mineralization. It is a process by which some microorganisms further break down humus to form simple inorganic nutrients. All these 5 steps of decomposition occurs simultaneously on detritus. From this image you can understand the difference between the litter and detritus. Actually, the chemical composition of detritus and climatic factors determines the rate of decomposition, and decomposition is largely an oxygen requiring process, and the rate of decomposition is lower if detritus is rich in lignin and chitin. The decomposition rate is quicker if detritus is rich in nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugars. The important climatic factor that regulate decomposition are temperature and soil moisture. Decomposition is favored in warm and moist environment. Decomposition is inhibited by low temperature and anaerobiosis. This results in the buildup of organic materials. The topic is energy flow. Sun is the ultimate source of energy for all ecosystem on Earth, except for the deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem. The solar radiation that can be utilized by plants for photosynthesis is called photosynthetically active radiation, PAR. From the overall solar radiation, only 50% is mentioned as PAR. The plants are able to capture only 2 to 10% of the PAR, and it is the energy used to sustain all life on Earth. There is unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to producers and then to the consumers. Therefore, all the organisms are directly or indirectly dependent on the sun. Every ecosystem follows first and the second law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy can be converted from one form to another form with the interaction of heat, work, and internal energy, but it can neither be created nor destroyed under any circumstances. The unidirectional flow of energy shows the first law of thermodynamics as energy from sun converted into chemical energy by the producers, for example plants, which are then utilized by the consumers. Then energy is neither created nor destroyed at any level. Next one is second law of thermodynamics. It states that the state of entropy of the entire universe as an isolated system always increase over time. The second law also states that the changes in the entropy in the universe can never be negative. Energy flow in the ecosystem occurs in the form of food chain. Food chain is defined as a series of organisms, each dependent on the next as a source of food. Food chain, the organisms are classified into 6 categories. The first one is producers. All the green plants in the ecosystem that utilize solar energy for photosynthesis. They are always autotrophic. And the second one is consumers. All heterotrophs are directly or indirectly dependent on plants for food, and hence they are all called consumers. Depending on their position in the food chain, they can be primary, secondary, tertiary, or quaternary consumers. Third one is primary consumer or herbivores, the organisms that are directly dependent on the producers. You can see in this image, grasshopper is the primary consumer. And the fourth one is secondary consumers, or it is also called as primary carnivores. Organisms are dependent on the primary consumers. You can see here, frog is an example for secondary consumer. And the fifth topic is tertiary consumers or secondary carnivores, the organisms that are dependent on the secondary consumers. And the sixth one is quaternary consumers or tertiary carnivores, the organisms that are dependent on the tertiary consumers. They are usually the top carnivore in a food chain. Finally, a food chain cannot have more than a quaternary consumer, as there won't be enough energy left. As we are going to learn about the two topics, one is ecological pyramid and the another one is plant succession. An ecological pyramid is a representation in a graphical manner of the relationship between different organisms in an ecosystem. Each of the bars of the pyramid represents a specific trophic level as well as their order. The order depends on who eats whom. This represents the flow of energy. The base of each pyramid represents the producer or the first trophic level, while the apex represents tertiary or top level consumer. The three commonly studied ecological pyramids are: first one is pyramid of number, second one pyramid of biomass, and third one pyramid of energy. You can see here the following images are examples for the three types of ecological pyramids. First one is the pyramid of numbers, which shows the different trophic levels. And the second type is the pyramid of biomass. And the third one is pyramid of energy or pyramid of productivity. Ecological succession is the process of change in the species structure of an ecological community over time. Time scale can be decades or even millions of years after a mass extinction. This change is orderly and sequential, parallel with the changes in the physical environment. In this topic, we are going to learn some more definitions. The first one is pioneer species, the species that invades a bare area. And the second one is pioneer community, the community that invades a bare area. And the third one is climax community, a community that is in near equilibrium with the environment. Fourth one is Surrey, a sequence of ecological communities arising in an area from the initial pioneer community to the final climax community. Fifth one is primary succession. It is a type of biological and ecological succession of plant life. It occurs in an environment in which new substrate is deposited. This new substrate is devoid of vegetation and other organisms. It also usually lacks soil and organic matter. It occurs in places such as land after a lava flow or area left from retreated glacier. And the sixth one is secondary succession. Secondary succession is a type of biological and ecological succession of plant life which takes place on a habitat that has been previously populated but has since been disturbed or damaged. Destructive events such as fires. Secondary succession, the invasion of species depends on the availability of water, conditions of the soil, and the environment. It also depends on whether any changes or other propagules are present. Since soil is already present, the succession rate is much faster and therefore the climax community is attained sooner. Succession always proceeds towards the mesic community. And the next topic is succession of plants. There are two types of succession of plants. First one is hydrarch. A succession originates in a water body is called hydrosphere or hydrarch succession. And the second one is xerarch. Xerosphere is a plant succession that is limited by water availability. It includes the different stages in a xerox succession. Xeroxere originates in extremely dry situations such as sand deserts, sand dunes, salt deserts, rock deserts, etc. The topic nutrient cycling or biogeochemical cycle. Nutrient cycling is defined as the movement of nutrients through the various components of an ecosystem is called nutrient cycling. It is also called as biogeochemical cycle. Based on the reservoir of nutrients, the nutrient cycling are classified into two types. First one is gaseous and second one is sedimentary. The reservoir of gaseous nutrient cycles exist in the atmosphere, for example carbon and nitrogen cycle. The reservoir for the sedimentary nutrient cycle exists in the Earth's crust, for example sulfur phosphorus cycle. One more definition is also here, and it is standing state. It is defined as the total amount of various nutrients like nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, calcium present in the soil at any given time is referred to as the standing state. It varies in different kinds of ecosystem and also on a seasonal basis. The environmental factors only responsible for the rate of release of nutrients into the atmosphere, and the reservoir functions to meet with the deficit occurring due to imbalance between influx and efflux. In this class, we are going to learn about the carbon cycle. Most of the chemicals that make up living tissues contain carbon. When organisms die, the carbon is recycled so that it can be used by future generations. The movement of carbon through the various components of ecosystem is called as carbon cycle. And this carbon cycle can be explained in 6 steps. Step 1. The carbon enters the atmosphere as carbon dioxide as a result of respiration and combustion. Step 2. Carbon dioxide is absorbed by the producers for photosynthesis to make up carbohydrates. Step 3. Animals feed on the producers. The food chain causes carbon to move along various trophic levels. Most of the carbon consumed is exhaled as carbon dioxide during the process respiration. The animals and plants eventually die. Step 4. The dead organisms are broken down by decomposers. This causes the carbon in their bodies to be returned to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. In some extraordinary conditions, decomposition is blocked. The plant and animal material may then be turned to fossil fuel for use in the future for combustion. Step 5. Marine animals may convert some of the carbon in their diet to calcium carbonate, which is then used to make the shells for their bodies. Over time, these shells of dead organisms collect on the seabed and form limestone. Due to various activities and movements of the earth, these limestones may eventually become exposed to the air where it is subjected to weathering. This causes the carbon to be released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Volcanic action may also release carbon dioxide. Step 6. Human activities have significantly influenced carbon cycle. Rapid deforestation and massive burning of fossil fuels have increased the rate of release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. In this class, we are going to learn about the sedimentary nutrient cycle. Example, phosphorus cycle. And phosphorus cycle is a process by which phosphorus moves through the lithosphere, hydrosphere and biosphere. And it can be explained in 5 steps. 1. Weathering. 2. Fertilizer. 3. Excretion and decomposition. 4. Dissolved phosphates. 5. Geological uplift. The definitions for the 5 steps are as follows. Step 1. Weathering. Weathering of uplifted rocks contributes phosphates to the land. Some phosphates eventually reach the ocean again. Step 2. Fertilizers. Phosphate fertilizers from fields may run off directly into streams. This may then become part of a soil or be absorbed by plants. Step 3: Excretion and decomposition. Excretion by animals and decomposition of both animals and plants that present in land or in ocean release phosphates on land or in water. Step 4: Dissolved phosphates. It contributes to forming the ocean sediments by precipitation. Conversion of these sediments into phosphate rocks is a very slow and gradual process. Step 5: Geological uplift. Geologic forces can slowly uplift phosphate rocks from the ocean floor to form mountains, and these rocks are thick with phosphate in them. The next topic is ecosystem services. The products of ecosystem processes are called ecosystem services. Services of healthy forest ecosystems are as follows: purification of air and water, mitigation of droughts and floods, cycling of nutrients, generation of fertile soils, providing habitats to wildlife, maintenance of biodiversity, pollination of crops, to provide storage site for carbon, providing aesthetic, cultural and spiritual values. The average price tag of these ecosystem services are estimated twice the value of the global gross national product. Out of the total cost of various ecosystem services, soil formation accounts for about 50%, recreation for about 10%, nutrient cycling about 10%. The cost of climate regulation and habitat for wildlife are about 6% each. Up to this content, the ecosystem topics are over. See you all in the next class. Never stop learning. Subscribe to our channel Bio Delight.